Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Excited to be with you this morning. Today, I
You
guess.
too. Thank you.
How are things going?
Things are going. They're going.
All
I'm
right.
not necessarily going in all the right directions, but they're going.
Oh, they're
So,
not. Okay. All right. Well,
yeah, well, what you gonna do? And just keep plugging away.
all right. Okay. I left you a couple voicemails yesterday. I saw your message in the Facebook group. I was trying to say it's okay. So hopefully that came through to you on my voice.
It did. It did. I got it, and that was good. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so would you be open to sharing with me kind of some of your thoughts coming into your meeting today?
Yeah, I guess when I think of story, so I'm like struggling to connect to a story that goes to what um to leadership. So it just started to catalog the things that I've done, the challenges that I've had, because nothing like really stands out um as like some momentous event. Like if I was writing about something else, and I would tell the story of my son's passing and how that changed me and whatnot. So um, there isn't anything like that in my life related to leadership. So I've just in a place right now where I'm just trying to think through what struggles I've had because of that, the things that I've done to overcome that, how I've come to a place where, um, I am someone who writes about and speaks about leadership and leadership development, and trying to get a connection back to me. So, struggling a little bit with the connection and the story part, but um, the more I think about it, the more I, I'm I can find nuggets, and maybe I don't need some huge thing. That lots of nuggets along the way are just as helpful and powerful. But that's where I am.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Would you be open to sharing with me what your intention is for wanting to share this story in Women Who Empower?
Um, so I guess the when we talked before, it was connecting it and kind of leading up to the book that I'm writing on leadership, or that I've written, and helping to build community and kind of a launching pad for the other book. So I guess that's the impetus,
And
the motivation in that.
okay, fair enough. How would you want your reader to feel after they've read your chapter?
I would want them to feel that they are, wherever they are, that they are enough, that they are adequate, that they are already leaders, um, and that they can do whatever they want and help, empower, influence people right from where they are, and that it's not necessary for them to have some title that gives them the authority to be able to lead, and that they can simply lead from where they are.
And and what am I hearing from you that you're not interested in telling your personal story in this
No,
particular?
I'm not saying that at all. I
No,
guess I'm saying I was struggling to find the connection.
got it. Yep. Okay, that makes sense.
No,
Uh,
I'm an open book and willing to say whatever if I can figure out what the whatever is.
yes, yes. Okay, that makes absolute perfect sense. So when we first spoke, we spoke about your book, but we didn't speak about your story or any of your personal background leading into that. So would you be open to sharing a little bit more about that with me in our time together today?
Sure, sure.
Okay. Um, and so I'll allow you to tell me where we begin with that, just kind of based on, what your personal journey has been to get you to the place where you are now.
Okay. So I want to say that I feel like I have always been a leader, serving in leadership roles and capacities, sometimes selected, sometimes um, injecting myself into a process because of what I was seeing around me wasn't going the way I thought it should go. And I tried not to be a complainer. And so my response to, or my approach rather than complaining, has been to just step in and do, and to be active, and then to try to be an influence and bring people along. So, um, you know, I have served on boards and committees, and um, like I said, sometimes it was out of necessity, and at least in my head, out of necessity. And sometimes people have come and said, we would like you on this board or committee, or could you step up and do this, that, or the other thing? And so, as I was thinking about it, every organization that I've been a part of, really, every organization I've been a part of, whether it was a job role or some sort of volunteer capacity, that's where I have found myself. There have been two times in my life in particular where I sought out a particular role and was not selected, which I guess I would say hurt my feelings. So when I worked at the IRS, they had this program that they put together to develop managers and leaders, and I did not get selected for that. And then when I was at the Association of California Water Agencies, um, three times there were opportunities to move up, and was overlooked each of those three times. Um, and so there is the ego piece of that, right? Of not being selected. But there was the other part of me that was like, wanting to explore, well, why did you want these positions? What did you think it would allow you to do? And what would that allow you to do that you couldn't do without being actually in those positions? And so, as I was thinking about this, particularly at Aqua, maybe not so much at the IRS, but particularly at Aqua, one of the things that I felt really compelled to do while I was there was to improve the culture. And without being in a position, in a director's role, part of the executive team, initially I felt like, well, I couldn't do anything. And then I realized actually I was in a position that was probably better because I had the pulse of the organization. Employees talk to me all the time. So I knew what was going on. And then when they decided to bring legal in-house, and I was appointed as the association's counsel, I became part of the leadership team, even though I did not have a title of, I wasn't one of the directors, which at the time only directors were part of that team. And then I became part of that team. So I had the opportunity to be a part of that inner circle, but I also, by not being one of them, I still had the opportunity to hear from the employees of the SSS. So I ended up being sort of a liaison between the two, which turned out to be an awesome thing, I think, for the association and employees in particular. So, kind of thinking this through, I think the approach I was thinking is, being an everyday leader is about just seeking those opportunities where you can bring what you have, your ability to influence, your ability to make a difference, and not having to have the title, not letting that stop you. And so as I was at the association, the other things I did, I think I told you I'd written a leadership column for the Association of Corporate Counsel for 6.5 years or however long it was. And seeing the results of that, where I was getting feedback from attorneys all around the world saying, how they appreciated looking at leadership in a different way, being asked to step inside and get in touch with who they were so that they could bring out those best parts of them in their roles as leaders, and not just have it be about whether or not they were appointed to some particular position. Um, and then, as it relates to, I think probably the two biggest, 2.5 biggest kind of life changing events in my life, going through a divorce and, kind of a bitter custody battle, what I learned about myself in that, in terms of resilience and, determination, fortitude, a vision for my life, and not wanting to end up down the path of poverty, because women end up being poor after divorce as opposed to thriving, and just being really determined not to become a statistic in that. An encounter that I had on the street one day with God, where he told me I was focused. Hold on a second, Kate.
Hold on, Randall. Hold on. Get ready to head on out to your mom's.
Okay. Have a good day. Um,
Encounter with God on the street.
oh, yes. So, kind of bemoaning the state of my life at that point, and wondering why, nothing that I was doing was seeming to work. And he said, try me. and I've told this story and written about it, but it just caught me off guard in the middle of the street. And then the change in my life from that point, in terms of being someone who is more grateful about everything that was happening in my life, even things that I didn't particularly like, to uh, to be grateful, appreciative. And then that set me up for being able to deal with, about 2 years later, when my son passed, and being able to walk through that experience, and and be someone on the other side of that who people saw, not feeling sorry for me, but someone that they saw as, I think, a leader in a different way, and someone who uses my gifts as a way of helping other people to get in touch with who they are and to walk through the challenging moments in their lives, to learn from mistakes and to grow, and to just be an influence and have impact. So, I'm constantly getting, emails or texts from people, saying how grateful they are that I am in their life, just sharing how I'm walking out life and being a leader in that respect. And that we all have that ability. We just have to see it that way, and not be looking for, the granting of some authority in order to be able to do that.
Would you be willing to share more with me around the circumstances of your son's passing and how you were able to, how you discover more of who you were and learn from the mistakes of that? Is there any opportunity to dig deeper into that?
Mm-hmm. So after the divorce, my ex-husband and I, let's say, were not on the same page about anything as it came to related to raising our son. And so we ended up in we ended up in a pretty bitter custody battle that involved mediators and evaluators and lawyers, court system, and all of that. And in the end, the really sad part on one end, but where we ended up was exactly where I thought we should have landed, which was to find a way to co-parent. And he was interested in moving on with his life, and he had someone else. And I was more focused on, this didn't work, but our son shouldn't be penalized because this didn't work out between us. And so I had fought really hard for that while he was fighting for sole custody.
Okay.
In the end, we had an evaluator come down and say that we should work it out, but if the court was going to make a decision one way or the other, mother should get the child. And all of a sudden, my ex-husband became really amenable to like negotiating things. So we started to sort of find an amicable way. It wasn't ever good, but an amicable way to move forward. However, in the process, he was really dug in on doing things his way. I think I sort of dug in on doing things my way in two separate houses, created lots of problems with my son and his father. And eventually, my son came to live with me full time because he just did not want to be there. His father had remarried, they had another child. He did not want to be there. And eventually he came to stay with me. But he was so angry and kind of bitter about what he felt like he was being shortchanged, that we struggled a little bit. He struggled in school, and he started getting into trouble. And he sort of the incidences that, as I see it, that led up to his death. He was on his way home from school one day. He got into a fight, yelling argument fight with some girl. My understanding is no one ever threw any blows or anything like that, but they're yelling and cursing at each other. He's threatening to hit her, with something. Police were called out. He was pulled aside. There was an altercation with the police. He was accused of resisting arrest. The witnesses tell a little different story. He was arrested, eventually because of that, expelled from school, ended up in I enrolled him in a homeschooling program that was out of Ojai. He finished his school. And so they had a graduation weekend down in Agora Hills. We went down for the weekend. On our way home after the graduation weekend ceremony, he fell asleep at the wheel of the car, and the car went off the road. He and the passenger sitting behind him both died. The other two passengers were injured, but they survived. And then for me, after that, it's like, what is this? What is life? What are we doing here? God, you told me to try you, to trust you. I do that. And I felt like this is the reward that I got for um, turning my life over basically, and trusting you. And so in the months after that, I was really just questioning everything. I was questioning the work that I was doing. I was working as a lobbyist at the time for the association. I wasn't really enjoying it. Don't enjoy California politics. So I was just kind of going through the motions. And then after Theron passed, it was just more going through the motions. And so I started looking for work elsewhere. And I ended up getting, I think, pretty close to an opportunity. And I went to the boss I had at the time. I had an interview that I needed to be at that conflicted with a meeting. And I just went to him and told him the truth. And I was like, I could lie to you. I could call in and say I was sick, but I don't want to do that. It's not who I am. I don't want to do that. I need to go to this interview. I'm not happy here, blah, 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 blah. And so he said, go. And he says, but if you're interested in a role as an attorney, what if we create a position here? Would that work for you? I said, well, if you create a position here before I get a position elsewhere, we can have a conversation about it. And ultimately he did. He convinced the executive director to create a council position. I was appointed to that position, which made things better for a while as it related to work, but there was still this kind of inner turmoil about, what is life all about? What are we doing here?
Wow.
And then the new boss, the new executive director, and it ultimately wasn't working. So I was continuing to work in a place where some of what I was doing was okay, some of it wasn't. Some of the people, and I was just like, I felt like I was wasting my time and my gifts. And as I was watching the decision making and the leadership that was happening in the organization, I just got curious. So I started taking courses at the community college, learning about organizational management, found it really interesting. And then I decided that I wanted to go back to school and actually study it. So I had just taken some courses here or there. And then I decided I wanted to go back to school and study it. So I did. I went back, eventually got a master's degree in organizational development and leadership. And now I felt like I was doing something that was lighting me up and making me feel excited and creating opportunities inside the organization. I created an internship program, a mentoring program. I worked on the culture committee and did some other things that I felt were more in alignment with who I was and what I felt was important. Not that water isn't important, because you can't live with you can't live life without water, but the lobbying and the politics behind it, it wasn't working for me. So that became kind of my focus. And so I did that inside the organization for a few years, realizing that my struggle to get out was really my opportunity to learn about leadership, poor leadership, good leadership, whatever. That it really was a laboratory, and I stopped fighting trying to get out and just said, you know what, this is an opportunity for me to learn up close and personal. Um, I'm able to talk to the directors, the board members of this organization. I can have, you know, frank and honest conversation with a lot of them, not everyone, but and try to understand why things are the way they are. And instead of moving somewhere else, that I could actually dig in. And so it became, instead of struggling, kind of surrendering and looking for the gems, the lessons that were a part of that experience. And then when I felt like I had what I needed, I left, and that was 2 years ago, um, to do, to be where I am now.
Amazing. What a journey. When you refer to your gifts, would you be open to sharing with me, where, maybe what, if there is, if you can be clear, I don't know that that's the right question, but I'm interested to know more, because you referred to them throughout the different aspects and different points of your life. So I'm wondering and wanting to know more about how these gifts show up, what you're identifying as your gifts, and how you then give those back to the world.
Okay, so I think one of my big gifts is kind of, I wouldn't say intuitive. I don't, there may be some of that, but I don't think like I feel like I'm some sort of psychic or intuitive, or even particularly a great empath. But I do see things,
Mm-hmm.
that people, as I'm talking to people, I think it is being able to take big concepts and distill them down into something that
Mm-hmm.
people understand a little easier. Definitely a problem solver, very logical, analytical. I have learned to and continue to grow in my ability to be creative,
Mm-hmm.
where there's a melding of the analytical and the logical with the creativity, so that it's not just so left brain,
Mm-hmm.
but being able to distill things to make them simple. And
Mm-hmm.
here's an example, which I find really odd. But when I was in college, I flunked out of college, the first time around. So I spent my time with people that I could explain everything we were studying. And then when it came time to take the test,
Mm-hmm.
they would always get better scores on the test than I would. And I was like, I
Right.
taught that to you. How is that even possible?
Right.
Learned later there's some, visual motor processing issues that, in time bound issues that create that. But so being able to do that, and I've always been able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I was a tutor, worked as a tutor through school, tutoring math. mostly. I studied mathematics at Berkeley.
Mhm.
One class short of my degree there. I think I might have mentioned that before. Um, and so that is like primary among my gifts, is being able to take these like challenging, difficult concepts
Yeah.
and understand them and then distill them into things that people, to help people understand. And seeing a way forward, solving problems and seeing a way forward where other people may not see them.
Mhm.
And then helping them to ultimately see them by asking questions and um,
Mhm.
and walking alongside them with
Mhm.
that. I feel like are the biggest gifts that I bring.
And would you be able to remind me about your leadership acronym and what that looks like again?
Oh, simple.
Yeah.
Yes, simple. Self-awareness,
Mhm.
intentionality, mastery, purposefulness, leverage, and energy.
I'm sorry, what was that L again?
Leverage
Mhm.
and then energy.
Okay. And yep, that's perfect. Got you to that point. Okay. Um, if it's okay, I just have one last question as I'm just
Sure,
asking all of this, just so I'm kind of putting all of the puzzle pieces together
sure.
to create the full vision here. Um,
I
you
need that. Thank you. I don't do it so well for myself. I can do it for other people, but
oh,
not so
always,
well for
always,
myself.
absolutely. That's always what it is, especially when it's our main gift that we give to other people. Generally, that's the one thing we can always use support with in ourselves. So when you are, I'm going to ask you a question about the grief and walking through the grief. Um,
Okay.
how, we went, so there's, I'm just trying to figure out the best way to ask this question. So it's, you experience, a great loss in your life. And
Mm-hmm.
I also received that other people saw how you walked through that and still to this day recognize that you have emerged as someone who, can help others and emerge as a leader in this. But I also heard that through this time, obviously you were asking what is this life and what is the meaning of all of this? Why am I here? So is there anything that you can share with me around walking through that journey and how you got from that place of, asking, what is this, and like, I gave it to you, I gave my life up to you, and now this happened. This is my reward, were some of the things we talked about. And from that place to what was that journey of being able to then emerge as someone who now is receiving texts from other people saying, thank you for the way you've walked through this. Can you tell me about that walk?
Um, so I guess it boiled down, it's, hmm, I started, I think, in a place that was very much who I was. There's a little bit of this still here, but so for me, the way to address things had been just being practical, right? Just, you tackle things, you look at a problem and then you go, so what's the best way to tackle this? You tackle it and you move on. And so the immediate thing that I did um, after that, the accident. So my son, for some reason, was not in his seatbelt. I don't know why. When we left and headed home, we stopped at a gas station, and when we left the gas station everyone in that car had their seatbelt on. So I was in the car, and my son was driving behind me. My sister was driving in the car. I was in her car, and then my son, his best friend, girlfriend, and his best friend's girlfriend were in the car behind us. And so when we left the gas station, they all had seatbelts on. And I know they did because I said, buckle up before we left. Somewhere along the way, my son and Danielle, the other passenger, the passenger who died, somehow ended up outside of their seatbelts. I don't know why. And so the first thing I did when I the first thing I did like a couple of weeks later was to get a rescued dog. So I was like fostering a dog. My mother kept saying, don't make any decisions while you're grieving. And I just felt compelled to take care of something. And so I fostered a dog. And then that didn't last very long because my mother was right. I should not have been making decisions when I was grieving. And I sort of got past a place of operating on adrenaline. And my better senses came about me. I was like, she was a little needy, and she was needier than I needed. She was needier than I was needy, I guess is the best way to say that.
Right.
And so, I took her back. But I felt like I needed to do something to be involved. And so I contacted the California Highway Patrol, and they had a course. I don't know if they still do it, but it's called Smart Start, and it's for parents and their new driving kids, 16, 17-year-old new drivers. And so I volunteered and went to be a guest speaker with them to share the story about how important it is to wear your seatbelt. And I felt like that was something like tangible that I could do. It's nothing I could do for my son and Danielle, but I could do something for other people's. It's like no one should have to go through this experience because you didn't have a seatbelt on. And my son hadn't been drinking or he wasn't drunk or anything like that. But he didn't have a seatbelt on, and he was obviously tired. They suspect he fell asleep at the wheel. And I don't have any reason to doubt that because there weren't any other like conditions that would explain it. So it was like, if I could keep other people's kids from taking their seat, it's not cool to wear your seatbelt. It's like you could prevent your parent from having to go through what I'm going through. And so wear your seatbelt. So that was something that I did for a few months. I would go in when they, over the course of a few courses, I guess, I would go in and just be a guest speaker as part of the program that they were doing. And then from there, it was kind of, I wasn't ever someone who buried myself in work, right? Because I wasn't doing work that mattered to me really at that point. So I didn't have anything to sort of bury myself in, and I was living alone. And so it was a lot of just me being alone and talking to myself. And when I got around to a place where I wasn't angry with God anymore, I started looking for a new church. So the church that I had been going to was the last place I saw my son. We had an open casket, And so I did not want to go back to that church because it held, that memory for me. So I started looking for a new church. In that process, um, I was visiting small churches, and I would go, and I didn't want to be seen. I needed to be in church. I needed to be around believers, excuse me, but I didn't want to be seen. And something that kept happening was that I would go, they would say hi. If I went back, they would say, it was nice to have you here. And they would keep, and I was like, yeah, I don't want this interaction.
Yeah.
And I wasn't like really conscious of it, but it was kind of like I didn't want that. So I ended up at one of the largest churches here in Sacramento because I thought, well, no one will bother me here. I could go to church, get what I needed out of church, but um, I wouldn't have to deal with like talking to people and dealing with people. And so I started going to Capitol. And as God knows better than we know ourselves, I started getting involved in things at the church. And I was like, I went to Celebrate Recovery, which at the time I went, now they have what's called Grief Share. A lot of churches have that program. There was no Grief Share at the time, so there was Celebrate Recovery, and I went through that, and they did some modification to help me kind of walk through the grief. I got involved with one of the pastors putting together a volunteer program. They were trying to grow their volunteer base, so I was in charge of that and was helping in that way. And then at the same time, I was seeing a therapist who actually had been the therapist my son was seeing. He had had court mandated anger management. And so the therapist my son was seeing, I ended up seeing. Um, Initially, I just called to tell him my son wouldn't be back, right? Because he had died. And he asked if I wanted to come in and talk with him. And I said, yeah. So I went in, and one time became many. Then he left Kaiser, went in private practice, and I continued to see him for a few years. Um, and so we worked through some of that together. Um, and then part of working through the grief was serving and in the church. And so as much as I had been running away from trying to connect with people, it was actually connecting with people from a place of service, not from a place of I needed something, but in looking out for other people and serving them and their needs and the needs of the church, that I really started to heal with that. Got connected with a couple of people who are friends still to this day, that on a more personal level kind of helped me walk through that as well. Just people very deeply in tune with their relationship with God, and helping me to understand, I don't know that understand is the right word, because I don't know if we ever understand, but sort of accepting a bigger plan, and that, while I wouldn't have chosen the path that I was on, it is the path that I was on, and that there is purpose in it. And I just needed to open myself up to that possibility.
Wow. Wow. So, what I'm hearing is, that when you were faced with this tragedy in your life, that the first thing you said to me was that you had to look at it from a practical standpoint, of what it was, right? And you were assessing the situation, and being alone with yourself to speak with yourself, right? To create that self-awareness around, how am I dealing with this? What is this in my life? What is the purpose for this in my life? And looking at actually what it was from that practical standpoint, like you said. This is not necessarily in order, but as a process, you also then created a very clear intention that you needed to take care of something else, right? So this started with the fostering of a dog, but then it also translated into needing to be around believers. And it also translated into needing to find a community and a church. You then also said that you needed to identify, what is the best way for me to tackle this and move on, creating, that whether you knew it at the time or not, in listening to you, right? It sounds like it was, and your words were, the best way to tackle it and move on, but it sounds to me like you were, through what you described to me, creating steps, right? To be able to move forward. And, then that led you to, and I didn't catch the full thing, but SMART, the California.
No, the Start Smart.
Start Smart. Thank you.
Start Smart. Yeah.
As a guest speaker, in Start Smart, right? So that you were looking at this situation and saying that I cannot change or help what has happened here with me and this other family. However, I can look to see what I can do for other families and other children in the future. And then that actually then led to, again, maybe not necessarily in the exact order, but, you saying, I want to be even part of something bigger and serve more. And then that actually led you to a different position within the church where you were serving and stepping up. It's like you went through this. I'm not saying it's a leadership role. I don't want to use that word, but you took yourself through self-awareness, intention, mastery. I know that might sound funny in that way. I mean mastery of, I need to figure out a way to master my life and taking steps.
Yeah.
Identify that I am now on this path, is what you said. I wouldn't have chosen it. I didn't want this path, but I am on this path. And so now how do I create this plan to figure out how do I, essentially master the moments, master the day, master my choices around how to decide to do this. The leverage part for me is that speaking, and you have this opportunity now.
The platforms. Yeah.
And then the energy that you talk about, and we haven't necessarily dug in deeply to what that means when you talk about that in reference to leadership, but as this reference to how you have emerged in your own life, the energy was you paying it forward, right? Taking this and turning it into something positive, and the whole path, everything you just described to me does take you through those simple steps, but it also has you at the end, based on the steps that you took, right? Based on the simple things, it emerged you as a leader. It emerged you as a leader in the community, in the church, and in your job. So then that's the place where that all comes together as you emerging as a leader, right? Like you emerged as a leader where all of these things led to you stepping forward in the church, right? As a leader, but you also mentioned to me in a separate kind of conversation within this conversation that you within your community, you obviously also took me down the path of what your professional leadership looked like. But you can't just be a leader in your professional life and
without
influence people. You can be, but you can't be if it's
not the way I really envision it, without being that to yourself and in your own personal life. Yes.
So
yes.
I feel like
that's the connection. Yeah.
The connection. That's what makes you different. So that's what I'm trying to say. Like, you can do that, but that's not who you are. That what makes you different, and being able to talk about being an expert in leadership, is without even really with probably without realizing it or identifying it, you've actually emerged with these leadership steps, even in the darkest times in your life. Now that's being a leader. That's being a leader to yourself. That's being a leader to God, for God. I don't know how much you want to get down that road. That's completely up to you. I'm comfortable with however you want to talk about it.
I'm comfortable. Without God, I would not be here.
Right.
So I'm absolutely comfortable with that.
Yeah. And so it's being, a leader of your gifts. It's being a leader of your purpose. And with all of that, you can then be a leader in your community, then be a leader in your profession, then be a leader in your business, right? But in how I'm looking at this specifically for your story is that, and I can even drill this back to your divorce, and you can, there is no but there. This does not have to be an either or, this can be an and, right? Where you say the steps that you took on leadership, absolutely, I can describe, and I chose not to dig into that completely, just because I was already seeing the synchronicities between your simple acronym and your pathway through grief, even though I know
probably for this, I mean, I could, with 2,000 words, I don't know that I get there.
The other piece of the
probably
divorce,
more than that, but go ahead.
Oh no, that's okay. I'm sorry. The other piece of the divorce is that I want this about you. I don't want to give any TV time to anybody else. I want this.
There's that, and a new husband. So I don't want him think, oh, there you are, dwelling on the yeah.
It's not necessary,
right?
But I do think it's necessary as a full scope to really honor who you are and how you live and how you are the expert in, to be able to create the, what we talked about as a path, right? The path that you took personally through, your most devastating time. When you can do that, when you can show up for yourself and for God in that way, when you can show up for your life and your purpose in that way, that's when you can also begin to really truly show up and lead and influence in a greater way for the world.
I see that. It's interesting. I hadn't, obviously I hadn't thought of it in those terms, and or even, I know simple came from God, but I hadn't connected it through. That really has been how I have navigated pretty much everything.
Right.
So, I mean, even the grief, through the grief journey, through the unhappiness in my job, which is where I mostly pulled it from. But it's always been that way now that you've made that connection for me. So,
and it is, we can all come up with the way that we live life when it's working. And that's good. I mean, we still want to learn from one another for that too, right? However, when you can demonstrate that this is also what works through challenges, through tragedy, through devastation, like when you can also show that it works in the darkest times, this is where it becomes really believable for anyone to be able to do. It also is what is going to draw the connection to people to follow you to your next book. This is where everyone will want to read a book about leadership, not just people looking to scale their business or something like that, right?
Right.
More of a global audience for you. And this story of how they can begin to connect with you is really how we create that, where people are now in your world and they know a piece of your heart. And this is where they'll never leave. They're never going to leave your circle now.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay. So how does that feel to you?
It feels good because it also, I think, helps to draw the portion of the journey of how I get from like out of my head into my heart,
Yeah.
right? And how I have evolved as part of the process. And I look at, as I was telling the story, kind of, walking through grief was out of my head into my heart, right? And it started with what I know, what which is just deal like with the concrete pieces, right? So what I can do is, here's this practical thing and here's this practical thing. And it was logical to do those things. Maybe not very heart centered to do those things. And then over time, that's where I have evolved in that, so that it is more heart centered, which ultimately, lands about 10 years ago when I opened up out of the grief and the hurt, and my husband came into my life, which,
Mm,
um,
wow.
we had dated before I got married,
Okay.
and he made a family, I made a family. And then 10 years ago, we reconnected. It was after a summer. We did a study at church called Loving Well, which was about God and love and our relationship, and how we ultimately, the way we love best is out of God's overflow of love for us. And instead of trying to love out of our humanness, we love with God's perfect love that overflows us. And when we finished that course, I reconnected with Michael.
Wow.
And eventually we ended up back together and then got married a couple of years later. So, and that is kind of a pattern in my life, is like starting here and then finally dropping down here,
Love it.
and leading out of that instead of trying to, be logical with it. And
Yeah.
as you're talking, to get people to be connected in a way that they follow then to the next thing and the next thing. That's not going to be a head journey. That's going to be a heart and a connection journey. So I'm hearing what you're saying.
Wonderful. Yeah. And our audience, they want to connect, like, our audience specifically in this book series, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is your audience. If you're ever going to have an opportunity to really connect from that heart space, these are your people.
Okay.
They're also professionals, right? They also are business owners. They also are executives. They're also all of those things. But if they're following our series, then they're also people
Yeah.
who want to connect. So it's a great opportunity for you to have exposure to this whole audience of those heart-centered people, right?
Right.
Move along with you in the journey, because you're naturally going to attract the left brain people to what you're doing.
Yes. Yes.
So, okay, you get it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. What other questions do you have for me?
So, I was, completing writing your chapter in the notes, and I've taken some notes. So what is, you know, you said that the best time to do this is to, after we have this session, to get started writing. I'm actually, we're going on vacation next week, and it's vacation, but I will be focused on writing. I'm not working, but I will be writing. And so we're going to the desert, which is a fabulous place for me in terms of connection. It's the first place I ever went on vacation by myself.
Mm,
And I did it the summer after my son passed.
Mhm.
Didn't think I would like the desert. I went because I could go for a full week for $199 and I didn't have any money. And so, but I loved it and have been back many, many times since then. Just felt a really spiritual connection being in the desert. And so we're going next week. And so I will be writing, but in terms of kind of taking this and turning it into next steps and writing, what does that process look like, or
Sure.
how does one get started?
Sure. So, first of all, I'll be sending you this recording.
Okay.
So I'm going to map it out for you here right now in this portion of the call.
Okay.
Also, what I'll say is where I started to kind of bring you through the connection of the personal piece and the simple acronym based on personally what you've been through. I would also go back to listen to that section
Okay.
if it strikes you. So some people, some authors will find it advantageous to go back and, you know, kind of pause and write based on, you know, how it's all brought together and you know, how we just did it there. Other authors will be, do you see how it can be advantageous, like right after we talk, because it's all fresh in what we just talked about, right? So some people will feel like, you know what, I got it based on what we talked about. So I'm just going to translate in my own mind, you know, the things that we've discussed here and start that way. So it's really up to you, but just know that the recording will be there for a reference point should you decide to go back and listen to that part.
Okay.
How it will be, how I see this beginning, I'm going to just break this down in sections. Is section 1 would be, you know, allowing your audience into, I always say, start right before you want to start. In other words, like
Okay.
you want to start with how did I personally get through you know, an extremely deep, dark, or challenging place in my life. What was like before, like right before that challenge occurred, or that place, that dark place occurred. So you are, you know, experiencing a relationship with your son. You know, you see him thriving in finishing high school, and you take a trip to his graduation. You know, if that's where you want to begin. I'm giving you an example. If you're like that,
Okay.
I want to paint like a more high level picture about my relationship with, like whatever feels good to you, but just kind of giving a frame of reference of what was like life like before.
Okay.
Okay, so that's part 1. And then part 2 is whatever you would like to share with the audience around, you know, how you know, like the loss of your son, you know, like either how you lost your son or how you learned of it or that it happened. And now this is how you are processing, right? So like, what your comfort level is there, that is your opportunity to connect with your audience. You're going to find
Okay.
that you're going to really help people that have experienced deep loss in a lot of ways, but you're going to really help people in this area. They're not going to have looked at it the way that you're about to present it to them, and you're going to be able to help people through this process.
Okay.
So whatever you're comfortable sharing in part 2 to bring the reader through what has happened would be your opportunity there. And part 3 is going to be, without saying the acronym simple, bringing your reader through that you first and foremost had to have some self-awareness around what happened, and looking at these pieces that were concrete, that were practical things, that were, you know, like you, and sitting with yourself, right, in silence, like, you know, and really having those conversations, right? So you're going to say the word self-awareness, but you're not going to say that you knew that there was a system then.
Okay.
And then you'll bring them through the next step, which was like, I had to, you know, I had this pull to want to take care of something. And, you know, this, like, I just, you know, there was an intention behind me wanting to care right? Like I care for someone, care about something. So you'll bring them through that whole process again.
Okay.
And you set an intention that you wanted to find a church, right? That was another intention that you had, right? And this was part of your healing, right? So then the mastery would then come as like, what I would say from mastery is kind of set it up like, I know from a business, like a professional perspective, that if I wanted to get through something, I had to master a skill or I had to master my plan. So how was I possibly going to get through this? All I knew is that I needed to figure out, what was the best I could do at this time? What is the best I can do with the information that I have? And I needed to figure that out and then tackle that head on, or however you want to say that, right? And then the leverage piece is like, I never looked at this as, I don't want it to be like leverage is a positive thing, right? Because that's not how I'm like, obviously like of course you would never have chosen this. It's more so like, I wasn't going to like, allow this to I couldn't allow myself to stay here and not say anything, right? Like if I could help one other person, or if I could help one other child or one other family, right? So really kind of getting into like, I had to use this opportunity, not opportunity. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but
No, I hear what you're saying. I can work on that, but I hear what you're saying.
yeah. Experience. Yeah. And
experience. Yeah.
I was going to use this experience to educate, someone else. Right. And then, as you did that, that fed something else in you that said, okay, now I'm going to need to pay it forward a little bit more. And that, then it was like, okay, I'm going to, even though I didn't even want to be seen in the church at first, now all of a sudden I'm volunteering. Now all of a sudden I'm a leader on this community or on this group project. Now all of a sudden, I'm the point person on this, right? And you did it because you wanted to serve, you wanted to give back, which is exactly what you were doing through the Start Smart. Now this is emerging in another area of your life as well, right? And this is you pouring that energy into something that was helping someone else with, and also helping you, but you were doing it to help other people. Like that was the energy behind that, right?
Yes.
And then looking back, you realize that all of this allowed you to then become more of a leader for yourself, a leader in your life, a leader in your purpose, a leader for God, a leader of your gifts, a leader in your church, a leader in your community, and also a leader in your job. But you realize that you never would have been able to be this leader in this profession. And this is all bringing this together at the end, right?
Right.
So your part 3, which is bringing them through kind of that acronym, is going to be a pretty big piece of it, right?
Okay.
Like you're going to have to really bring them through each step. So then part 4 is saying like, bringing it full circle, like we just talked about, which now I realize that all of me going through these steps was helping me emerge as a leader in my own life, right? A leader in my own gifts. And that helped me then become a leader even more of a leader in my profession, a well-rounded leader in my profession, however you want to say that. So if that's number 4, then number 5 is now bringing it home with this acronym. What I realized I did in this area of my life, but also I do this in every area of my life, is I take myself through my simple system, which is my simple strategy for leadership. It is number 1, self-awareness. Number 2, right? So if you want to kind of really drive it home then. And I realized that, what is different about my style of leadership is that I show up as a leader in every single area of my life, in every situation. See, it's situational. It's not buckets. That's the key here. That when I am in an experience in my life, these are the steps in which I choose to take to emerge as a leader.
I would follow her.
Exactly. Precisely. Right. So we don't talk about the book in the chapter itself, but we do talk about it in the bio,
Okay.
because the chapter is really the story. I mean, you got these people now,
Okay.
right? I will follow her. Exactly. That's exactly how they're going to feel. So you tie it out, you tie it at the end and end with that piece of bringing it all home with, this is your acronym for leadership in your life, in every situation in your life. And then
Okay.
the bio is about yourself. Obviously, we want your credentials and your accolades and whatever you can share for us in that regard. And then we also want, you know, as, you know, Whitnie began to identify the simple system in her own life, you know, she has created a platform in which she is offering this strategy to the world. And this can, one way this can be found is through her book. And then say the name of the book and say
Okay.
the website of the book, or where they can find the book. And even if on that website, it brings them to a pre-order or a waiting list or whatever, doesn't matter. Don't put that in the bio, because the bio obviously will be there forever. So you don't want to say it's being released soon or any date.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Because if somebody picks this up in 2 years from now, it's going to be, you know what I mean? It's not going to be relevant.
Right. Right.
You want to keep it that she offers this. One way that she begins to, you know, offer this strategy to the world is through her book. And then the book is here, because I'm assuming you're going to be doing speaking, you're going to be doing programs. So there's going to be all these, this is a
Right.
whole platform around this that's going to be built out. So it's one website that you direct them to. And then that website you'll build out forever. Like, we're always evolving and changing, right? So, you know, you talk about leading them to this one place. And then when they get to that place, whatever stage you're at in business, and a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, when someone picks up the book, they just go to the website, find where you are, and you tell them the rest of the story about where you want them to go, a program, an event,
Okay.
whatever, on your website. Does that make sense?
Okay. It makes perfect sense. Yes.
Awesome. Perfect. So does that feel like it's does that feel like a good plan?
Yes.
Where you have some place to start?
It does. It
Okay.
and because before it was just feeling like disparate parts, and now I can see a thread in how to connect it. So yes.
Right. Yeah, it's a beautiful thread. I mean, it's very, leadership isn't unique. That's why this is so powerful, because this is such a different way to look at life, and also this topic of leadership. You know, it's important to talk about leadership, and it's a buzzword, and there's millions upon millions of people that are
Right.
interested in leadership. But to be able to have a unique approach to something as common as leadership is key. And that's what this will do.
Okay. Awesome. Perfect. Thank you.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited for you.
Thank you.
Okay. So let me know as you're writing, if you need any support, please reach out. Let us know.
I do have a question, and I'm assuming somewhere along, and maybe it hasn't happened yet. So in terms of writing and getting, so that it's not just, you know, this happened and this happened and this happened, right? I know I know I'm just probably gonna have to just sit in, drop inside. But in the process of editing and whatnot, if it is coming across as like, it's just like these events and things that happen, but there's not something that's coming out, is that part of the process to help us to go back in and rework things so that that emotion and stuff comes out?
Yes.
Okay.
Our editor is phenomenal. She is absolutely phenomenal. She leaves no stone unturned.
Okay.
So when you submit your story to me, I will be looking at it, does it meet the goals that we spoke about, which
Okay.
are your intention of wanting to build a community around your next book and your platform of leadership, right? And you also, you want to bring this acronym to life, right? Like so I'm looking at all of your goals and your intentions and why you're doing this, everything that we talked about in the beginning of the call.
Okay.
Does this story meet all of that? Does it, so basically if you send it over and, I feel like there's a huge chunk missing of connection with audience, I will say to you, okay, this is perfect. It was a good place to start. I feel like we can have a little bit more here where I need to connect with you.
Okay. Okay.
If it's, sometimes you have it in there and I'm like, this is everything we talked about and this is great. And then other times I'll say, okay, let's, we talked about this. Did you still want to include that? And we'll have a conversation. Now that's our step. Then it'll go to the editor.
Okay.
Now, editor's what you described. Okay. She's going to look at it for flow, for transition, for bringing the story together, for, of course, proofreading, all of it. So she's going to copy edit it. She's going to proofread it. She's going to be a traditional editor. She does all of it.
Okay.
So she's going to do all of that. And this is going to happen in the beginning of October. That's why all the chapters are going to be sent over together. So they're all due by the 25th. I bring them together. I send them over to her all at once so she can read it as a full book, obviously. And then I send you your individual chapter back. And with all of her, so this does have to be sent over, which I'm sure you saw as a Word document so that she is able to go in and edit. I'll send that back to you with all of her edits, and then you'll go through them and accept whatever changes or make whatever changes that are recommended on there that feel good to you. You don't have to take every recommendation, but if you do want to take the recommendation, then that would be your opportunity to massage your story a little bit. Okay. Then whatever changes you make are sent back to her. Well, you send them to me and then I forward them to her again because I'm looking at it each pass. Okay. So I touch the story, however. Before it goes to publish, right? But then I send it over to her. She then edits that's a tongue twister. Edits. She's editing again with the changes that you have made.
Okay.
And she's going to make additional comments and changes. Okay. So then you're going to get the chapter one more time from her.
Okay.
And you are then going to look at it again with fresh eyes and say, okay, based on the changes that I've made, now she's recommending this or this. Now at that point, it's not going to be as much as it was the first time. Okay. It's just going to be maybe like things here and there.
Right.
To really polish it. You will accept whatever polished changes at that point feel good to you. If it's a misspelled word, we're accepting it on your behalf, right? But if it's something that is pertaining to your story, you own your story.
Okay.
You have to give us permission to print it, so you have to give the final approval. So then you will give the final approval. When you send that back that last time, you should know that this is your story that goes to print. Okay. You're sending this over saying, this is my story that I want to print. And then we will be proofing that one more time, and we'll only announce you if there's an issue. So you won't necessarily hear from us again after that. We'll basically say this is approved, but you get like another round of edits after that, unless we find something, and then we'll let you know. So that's what that will look like. So yes, there is all through the month of October. Really, is that
happening. Okay. Cool.
Right?
Cool. All right.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to read this. This replay will get to you by the latest tomorrow. We just have to kind of like upload, send things over and all that fun stuff, but we will be getting this off to you. So that you'll have this as a reference. And like I said, if anything pops up in the meantime, please just let us know. Otherwise I will be excited to read it.
Okay, cool. Well, I will be focused on that all next week. So.
All right. Enjoy your vacation.
I will. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Whitnie.
All right.
Talk with you soon.
Take care. All right. Bye.